Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you all for joining us on what's a wet and windy Tuesday afternoon. Delighted to be back talking about credit union technology here at Action Point. So today's webinar, really, the whole goal is Credit Union 2021, sustaining your digital journey. I'll introduce my guests in just a little bit, but before I kick off, I guess a little bit about Action Point. So the sign behind me tells us we've been working with credit unions. It's now 15 years. It was 12. The banner is a bit out of date, but we've been heavily involved with the credit union sector since day dot, since the company was established in 2005. In that time, we've learned a lot about credit unions. I think credit unions have gone on a very, very interesting digital journey. We're very grateful to our credit union clients who've really showed a great understanding and a great proactivity when it comes to technology services. And we've learned a lot about managed services and providing a better customer experience for them as well. So I guess the goal of today's webinar really is to look at the existing environment that's out there, the challenges that are being faced by credit unions. We will also, I guess, look at remote working and hybrid working. We see level 3 restrictions coming into place as of tomorrow. What's that going to mean for the hybrid and remote working environment? For a lot of people, it'll be business as usual because of the great strides they've made over the next 6 months, but perhaps there's other areas or challenges that we need to consider as well. At the end of the webinar, then we'll look towards the future. And I want to speak to my 3 panelists about the key, I suppose, takeaways and the key learnings and the key activities they're going to be undertaking in the next 6, 9, 12 months. And as I said, it's Credit Union 2021, so we want to look to the new year at the tech trends that are available to us. Our speakers today, my colleague Finian Nally is Head of Microsoft Cloud Solutions at Action Point. Idel Me is Managing Director at IT Security People, and Caroline Long is CEO of Limerick and District Credit Union. And I'd like to thank them all for joining us. So I'm just going to drop my share screen just for a second and we'll go full panelists. So guys, I want to give you each of you a chance to introduce yourselves. So Finian, if you'd like to give us a brief intro there.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon at this stage. My name is Finian Nally. I'm Head of Cloud Solutions here at Action Point. I've been with the business about 5 years, and I suppose in that time, I've worked with businesses large and small, including many credit unions, helping them on their modernization and transformation journeys. A lot of my focus these days has been on IT security and remote working and helping people adapt to this new world that we live in and the hybrid workplace that we're now in. So looking forward to today's session and to chatting with everyone on the call.
Thanks very much, Finian. Idel, if you'd like to go next.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name is Idel Me. I'm the Managing Director of the IT Security People based in Clarecastle, County Clare. So we basically provide IT security services to companies and organizations, and we've worked with a few credit unions. We've worked with some in a data breach investigation, so a post-incident scenario, and we also work then in a risk management pre-incident planning scenario. So we work closely with IT providers, and Action Point is one of those providers that we work very closely with from a strategic point of view, and we work with Caroline and the team in Cardiff.
Yeah, no, thanks, Idel, and it's been a great partnership to date, and looking forward to hearing your insights, certainly around the remote working section. Caroline, last but not least, brief intro.
Well, my name is Caroline Long, and I'm the CEO of Limerick and District Credit Union. We have approximately 30,000 members, and we have 3 full-time branches open at the moment. We have been working with Action Point for the last 3 to 4 years, and with Idel as well in ITPS. And to be honest with you, we look at us all together as a team to ensure that we have the safest IT platform that we can possibly have, and that we're working with people that are more proactive than reactive. It's vital that our IT platform is reliable and safe and secure for all of our business.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So Caroline, actually in reverse order, I'll probably start with you. I guess, look, you're very well positioned at this. You're leading a growing and dynamic credit union in the city centre here in Limerick. Lots of footfall, very, very busy. I guess talk to us about maybe some of the economic challenges posed by COVID-19 to the credit union sector in general, and maybe talk about your day-to-day since those initial lockdowns happened in March.
Well, I suppose throughout the credit union sector, everybody's loan book fell through the floor, so that obviously affected their income first and foremost. Secondly, shares were coming into the credit union at a horrendous rate, and the shares end up costing the credit union because you have to put 10% of that away to keep your statutory reserves the same. Additionally, there were costs, like I suppose every other business in the country. We had the costs of renovating all of our offices and changing all of our practices to ensure that we were taking care of our members and staff to the best of our ability. It has had a big effect, I suppose, in the last 8 months, and I suppose today, the news today is going to have an impact going forward. And again, looking at our projections going forward, they'll be altered again by the fact that we will probably have to put additional factors in place to ensure that we protect everybody to the best of our ability again.
Very good. I guess, Caroline, more specifically on, like, you guys have gone on a pretty big technology journey over the past number of years. I guess, what are the key steps you've taken that have maybe helped you to be better prepared for remote working, for online consultations, things like that?
Well, I suppose we switched over to Action Point about 3.5 years ago, and from the very beginning, we felt we were in a very safe pair of hands. We initially, with Action Point, carried out an onboarding audit just to see where we are, and we produced an as-in position paper. Then together we agreed an optimal position, and we put a plan together to work towards this in a realistic time period. Our goal was to reach an optimal IT environment and a safe environment for our credit union. We see IT as a critical enabler for our business. Our whole business is based on an IT platform. So we have to ensure that we are comfortable with our partners, and we need to ensure that we have the best partners, to be honest with you, to ensure that everything is safe and secure, particularly in the environment we have going forward. And we need to work with proactive people, not reactive.
Okay, very good point. Very good point. And there's a multitude of partners involved in any credit union
Yes.
IT stack, Caroline, isn't there?
There is
I
indeed.
suppose the integration can be the tricky part. Talk to me a little bit about the customers then, and I'll move on to Adele and Finian. But again, it's a flowing conversation, so we'll have lots of time to talk to everyone. But talk to us a little bit about, I suppose, your customers and how COVID has affected them, and maybe some of the technologies at your disposal that have helped to maybe alleviate that.
Well, initially I felt that the disease itself, the unknown part of the disease itself, was very disruptive, and it was very frightening for people. You know, in the beginning, I suppose people were afraid to come in, and while they needed to transact their business, they were afraid to come into the offices. Initially, we didn't really know whether we were going to remain open or not, because the government, it took them a little bit of time to put essential services together. And when we appeared on that list, we then had to look at how we were going to service our members the best way that we could, and take into consideration that a lot of them were afraid to come into the offices. We found a huge increase in people registering online and availing of our services online rather than face to face at the counter. We have a lot of very vulnerable members, and I suppose because we're a credit union and community based, our staff would have been very aware of these people, and you know, we made arrangements to maybe go to their homes and do what needed to be done for them. Or some of our more vulnerable members, the staff members knew, would have just given a phone call just to say, how are you coping, that sort of thing. We also helped an awful lot of people who traditionally would never have transacted online to get online, and we spent a lot of time. So a lot of our resources were taken from front of house and put into back of house to sit and talk people through getting online and how to transact, and providing that sort of support. I suppose COVID-19 has caused an awful lot of stress, anxiety, and I think at this stage fatigue with people in the country, with our members, with everybody. And you know, when we had the significant fall of members coming into the office, it was very difficult. It was difficult for our staff to cope as well, because there was a change. There was a change in the way that they did their work. They were going from, as I say, front office to back office. But you know, that's a reality going forward, because COVID-19 is not going to go away, or if it does, something else will take its place, and people are going to do their business in a different way. So really, our IT providers, we all need to work together as a team to ensure that we go forward safely and ensure that we can actually develop the businesses that and develop all the background so that our members can do their business in a safe way and online.
That's very good answer, Caroline. It's very interesting to see credit unions sticking to their ethos of really supporting members first, and to hear of people doing call outs and ensuring that more vulnerable people get their banking done is really fascinating to see. And obviously the expansion of digital services as well. And I think that's probably a trend we're going to see into the future. Idel, I suppose it's one of those busy times in the IT security world. Maybe some for good, some for bad. I suppose, what were your key observations over the last 6 months?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Peter, IT security is busy all the time. I suppose it's one of those things. Caroline was relieved to see the essential worker list. We were like, oh no, please, are we on essential work? Please, no, give us a break. But so I suppose one of the things with COVID for us that stood out was that it was something that maybe was going to allow us to explain IT security threats to people, because we work in an environment where we're faced with a threat that we can't see, and we don't know where it's coming from or who's going to pass it on to us. And that's the same as COVID for us, that COVID and IT security risk is quite similar, where we don't know who the source is, we don't know where it's coming, we can't see when it happens, we might know for a few days that we're actually infected. And so in that sense, we have some similarities with COVID that way. But in terms of the risks, I suppose what happens is that when something like a crisis happens, most people go online to look for information, and that's where attackers then can start to leverage that, because they still use the same attack vector. So they will send phishing emails, they will send links with viruses, clickbait, as we call it, something that's designed to create a sense of urgency and make you click and maybe download something. So that when those types of things happen, there's a lot more traffic generated online, which means that there's a lot more potential for somebody to click on something and maybe inadvertently cause an incident. And so we have the external attack vector, and then we have the internal threats as well, which can be accidental or which might be on purpose. So we could have something where somebody is remote working and something is set up very quickly, a piece of software is installed just to get you over the hump because you need to get the next job done, and then nobody goes back and closes off the doors for what happened. People maybe start to forward something to their private email because they can't get access to the data another way, and now maybe we have personal data or records for members or something that's happening that's putting us in the realm of a GDPR issue as well, which is a whole other can of worms that you try to avoid. And then I suppose it's another issue that can arise is when people's jobs are at risk, and when people start to get worried, that then they can start to make poor decisions and maybe copy something onto a USB or take a copy of data that they shouldn't have, just in case they think they might need it down the line.
Is there an element of, there's no one really looking over my shoulder about security? Is there an element of kind of that social or peer pressure when you're in an office environment, and that's almost removed when you're sitting at home? And
it works both ways. So you have people are more likely to engage in what call it risky behavior when they're remote and they're distant from the office, but also it works in favor of the attackers, because if I get an email that has a dodgy link, my colleague isn't walking past me or at the desk next door, I say, oh, do you think that looks okay, or what do you think? So people are, I suppose, everybody is walking down a dark alley at night on their own when they're working remotely. We're a lot more, we don't have the gang of us, so that the mugger walks past us, but we're all down a dark alley on our own. And as well as that, I suppose we're all working in a different environment, which makes it very difficult for our IT providers, where once we were all in the office and 30, 40, 50 people all inside, and you call help desk and you ask them to do something to assist you. Help desk know that environment. Action Point maybe have set up that environment, but now we're all working from home, and somebody's got Sky Broadband and somebody's got this and somebody's got that, and somebody else has got an Xbox download that's happening in the room next door, and that's what's causing their bandwidth issues, and we don't know what we're facing. So there are challenges from a business continuity point of view in terms of the infrastructure that we have, and then we have our users and their behaviors and their actions, and I suppose their levels of training and awareness of what actually is a security incident and what isn't, because sometimes you get the people have the impression that a security incident is something that's caused by somebody external to the organization who's trying to carry out a malicious act, and that's not necessarily a security breach. Is I've installed Dropbox and I'm copying Excel files into that just to make it easier for me to work from home. So
yeah. We'll come back to that point on remote working in a while, but you were kind of moving on to my next question. I wanted to bring Finian in here. I suppose David Jeffries in the Sunday Business Post 2 weeks ago wrote about beware the convenience of shadow IT. Can you give us an idea, first of all, what shadow IT is, and I suppose what the usage behaviors we're seeing as well?
Yeah, I suppose, Peter, we're seeing a lot of different things out there right now, and kind of Caroline hinted at it earlier on in terms of the fatigue that's out there right now. We've gone from a scenario of adapting very, very quickly, or reacting in many, many cases, to remote working, to still being in that same position, the same equipment, the same setup, those kind of things. And I think, employees are trying to do their best. They're trying to get their work done, many coping with family situations and other circumstances around that. And I think the fundamental motivation for many people is, I want to get the job done. However, if we as an employer are not giving them the tools and the tool set to enable that job to be done successfully, then we're going to go down that slippery slope of shadow IT. And Adele mentioned it, maybe someone wants to share a file and they start to use Dropbox because they know that shares files, and maybe they start to use other tools. And I think a lot of that boils back to, I suppose, the consumerization of IT. As an individual, I'm used to things just working. My Netflix, my Amazon, my whatever, it just works. But when we go into the business world, often it just doesn't work, and we haven't been given those correct tool sets. So we have an awareness. People are using WhatsApp, people are using various tools on a day-to-day basis. They know how to communicate effectively on a social level, but when they move into a business world and a business environment, but they're also in their social setting at home, they're bringing more and more of those tools into play. And often the employer or the business actually doesn't realize what's going on. But the employer looks at it and says, well, actually, is my employee being productive? Yes, they are. Therefore, I want to move on to the next thing. Instead of actually taking a step back and looking at almost that fatigue curve and saying, well, hang on a second, we rushed into this, we got ready, we got through phase 1 of COVID, we adapted quickly, but now we need to take a step back. We need to look at our plan. We need to actually reevaluate things, and are we doing things properly? Are we risking burnout from our employees? Are we risking security risks or governance risks into the business? So now is the time to take stock and actually say, well, actually, can we do it better?
Interesting point. And I want to talk about managing the digital estate and this whole productivity versus security. Wouldn't call it a burden, but certainly it's a dynamic we're seeing where one's traded off against the other. So we might get to that in a little while later. Caroline, I want to move on to, I suppose, specifically remote working. I suppose Limerick and District, like so many of us, were thrust into this in March. We didn't really know what to make of it. We had some people went fully remote. Obviously, your branch was open. I suppose talk to us about some of the tools that you guys have been using throughout COVID.
Yes, I suppose when COVID came in, really we had to look at remote working options, and very quickly Action Point set us up. I'll be very honest, set us up to be able to work at home and to work securely at home, which is the major point there. Finian mentioned, you have to be so careful that what you do, what you do is not going to cause any security risk to your main system. So we were set up to work from home, and to be honest with you, while we ended up having the offices open and a lot of the time being in work, it's now set up, and it's set up securely. And what is happening is that we have put that into our business continuity plan, because obviously COVID is here right now, but we don't know what's around the corner. So we have built it into our business continuity plan so that we can avail of it at any stage. As I said, we were deemed an essential service, so that meant that the offices would remain open. And we had 5 offices at the time, so we reduced down to 3 offices. And I suppose Teams has been the big facilitator for us.
Mm.
And what we had was Action Point set up all of our members of staff on Teams, but also they set up all of our board of directors on encrypted iPads. They set up Teams on each of those iPads, which is only used for credit union business. So, it's not used for their normal things at home. So we found that very efficient because it ensured that the governance of the credit union continued seamlessly. There was no break in that at all. So they worked with us, and Edel worked with us, and we made sure that that was all secure, so that the credit union the governance could remain intact. Also, what I have found is that there's an efficiency, because a number of the management team will travel here, there, and everywhere for different meetings. We're not doing that anymore. We're having all our meetings on Teams. So there's an efficiency involved there, that we're working from our own desks. And also, we have 28 staff, and every Wednesday morning we would meet up for 2 hours for a staff training session. Now those staff training sessions are taking place in their own offices, which is actually freeing up maybe 45 minutes for the staff would have used to get back to their cars and get back to their office and open up their offices and that. So there's efficiencies there as well. So from our point of view, I suppose it was both an opportunity and I won't say a blessing, but it was certainly an opportunity, and it made us look at other options that probably in the busy working environment that we had said, oh yeah, we'll look at that, but we didn't. But the fact that we had to, it certainly
The hand was forced.
was forced on us, but sometimes that needs to happen too.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's fascinating to hear the usership and the user behavior as well, and how you were able to. Governance is very, very important in leadership, and to be able to carry on those duties and tasks is obviously extremely valuable. So, just very, very interesting to hear. And I also think that the time travel to meetings, and I know the commutes are all gone now as well, but Mark Hendy from Mazars was on another webinar recently. I said that was the biggest thing. We had executives grounded overnight, like our cost of our cost of sales really, and our cost of travel was completely deleted, which is great. So interesting point.
The other thing is that I think when you set up anything like this, Peter, like when we set it up, Action Point engaged with each member of our board of directors and made sure that they were comfortable on using Teams, accessing it, and all the rest of it. So when you're introducing something, you have to have that backup, and you have to have as you're aware, Edel, we have to be sure everything was secure, because there's no point in introducing something and saying, "Oh, this is great," unless people are very comfortable and understand how to use it.
Yeah, something Finian talks about a lot is that awareness. Is that awareness amongst the staff, and are we aware that they're trained on it? So it's interesting to mention that there as well. Edel, I guess as I was saying to Caroline, we were thrust into this remote working environment, and we didn't really have much time to plan. Even from an IT company's perspective, it was a scramble. But we got there. I guess to your point previously, it was really about getting people set up, getting people productive, and maybe some risks were probably overlooked. I'm saying maybe now in the most general sense, but I suppose looking ahead now, like this is a 12-month, 18-month strategy we probably need now, probably longer term if we look at hybrid work. What are the key risk areas that we're going to have to resolve to make this sustainable?
Well, I suppose what we need to look at, Peter, is that we've moved very quickly in recent years from a situation where our staff, our infrastructure, and our data were all in the same location. So they were all within the physical boundary of the office wall. We started to move our data to the cloud. Our infrastructure, some of the infrastructure has moved to the cloud as well, and now we've moved our users outside of the office as well. So instead of having 5 branch offices, maybe Caroline potentially has 40 branch offices now. And so that's something that we need to look at, I suppose, and including everything external, and we're making sure that we include that on our risk review, and what could go wrong within the home environment. And I suppose, as Finian said there, that the consumerization of IT and the mingling of business and social location. What I think is something that needs to be considered by a lot of people is that from a generational and an age profile point of view, we need to consider our users as potentially two separate sets of users. We have people who worked in an IT environment in business before there was this onslaught of social technology and subscription services and Googles and Netflixes and all of this. And so they came from IT as a business tool, and now IT is everywhere in our social lives as well. But now we have a generation of users who actually came from the other side, who came from a consumer, I can do anything, everything is available to me straight away, and there are no boundaries in the decisions potentially that I'm making, into the business environment. And so they're taking the habits that they've had in a looser set of training for themselves into that environment. So we need to make sure that that people's expectations around what's expected of them, what the boundaries are of what they can and can't do with data that they're available, or that those boundaries are known to them. And we also have a scenario then, say, with our infrastructure, where we want to know about everything immediately. So we want to know the CCTV, is the office secure? We want to know, does the printer need toner? We want to turn on the kettle when we're 3 miles from home. We want to do all of these things. And so the Internet of Things as well, turn on the heating over your app from your phone, any app, anything that you can control. So if we've got these types of devices in the office, they might be provided by third-party providers, and it's important that Action Point, or that your security team, know that you've brought these elements into your business, because sometimes organizations are taking on services from third parties that, although they're using the internet, they're not availing of the infrastructure that's being managed and maintained and provided by the IT provider, but it's causing a security risk potentially. So that anything that you can control by an app, or anything that you can view externally, or anything that you can connect to the internet on, is potentially a security threat. And so, as Caroline said before, we all need to work together as a team. So organizations shouldn't be making decisions about anything technology related, even though it might seem that the website is actually completely outside. It's nothing to do with Action Point. We've got an IT provider, but in that scenario, you will have an instance maybe where you've got a contact us form, and they're sending back in emails, but what email accounts are they using? Sometimes it might be just using a generic one that the web designer has, and now you've got people who might be emailing in, oh, my membership number is this or that or the other, and you have no control over that. So those are the types of things where you need to say, is there something that's happening with this service where I need to involve my IT team in this?
And Edel, it sounds, it sounds probably maybe for the average person, it seems very onerous, and there's a lot of effort involved here, and we have a lot of checks and balances. Like, are there tools now that we can simplify a lot more of this stuff? Or is there services that you offer where you simplify the whole security estate and the IT estate?
Yes, well, I suppose, Peter, the first part of this, a lot of it is being done by the credit unions, especially. They're high up on the good list for the behaviour in IT security, because they have to maintain the risk register. They have to know what the risks are. So that's the first step in this, is knowing where your risks are, and I suppose talking to the team about what the strategy is. But after that, then just implementing and being sensible about the decisions that are being made, and then auditing is very important. So, say with Caroline there, we meet with the Action Point team and with Caroline once a quarter, and we say, okay, this is what we decided last quarter. This is what was implemented. Maybe the technologies have changed. Maybe COVID hit us and we've had to skew off in a different direction. But You know, we keep a constant review of where we were going and where we are and where we want to be, and that's all enveloped then in the best use of technology from a productivity point of view and from a security point of view, because I think convenience is 100% the biggest threat to IT security is convenience, hands
That's
down.
interesting.
Yeah.
Finian, you might be able to elaborate a bit more on that point from your own experience, what Adela said there about convenience being such a convenience being a big obstacle for IT security. And I know you spoke a lot about when we did webinars during the year, it's that constant balancing act, productivity versus convenience, convenience and security. So can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind with me is pace. You know, the pace of change in the world that we live in right now, the pace of expectation on everyone to get things done quicker. You know, the expectation that members in a credit union have to get their information instantly, to get a response from a loan application very, very quickly. The pace that an employee has to get something back because they've also got to manage their home life and get the kids off to school at the same level. So pace is something that's been introduced across the board, you know, both from people and on the technology front. And everyone's struggling. Everyone is struggling to keep up. You know, it's not as if we can all easily adapt and go, well, yes, of course I can work at that light speed. And with that pace things, it becomes easier to forget things, you know, forget the process that we have in place, forget the tools that we have in place to actually do this versus another one that I've just got off the shelf that I can do it quicker. So pace is in the mix there in a very, very big way. But kind of hitting back on some of the points there that Caroline and Adele have made, you know, one thing that struck me from the outset was when Caroline mentioned the plan. And I think when we look at all of these things, and you mentioned it can become overwhelming in terms of the types of security that we need and the way we work now and all those kind of things. For me, it all comes back to the plan. And, you know, the plan that many businesses had around their technology or their modernization plan, you know, often that has been sitting on a shelf for a number of years. Maybe they've adopted it to a certain level, but have they really looked at that and put that into the perspective of the modern world, the world in which we live in right now, where our office isn't the four walls, as Adele mentioned earlier on, it's among so many different places. And balancing that with the expectation now that employees have, you know, in our recent remote working survey, we found that over 50% of employees want to work at home 2 to 3 days a week. So that's not a temporary thing or something that's going to be here in the short term. It's actually the reality. It's the long-term thing. So we take that back and start looking, well, actually, how do we introduce a hybrid workplace plan? How do we actually start really preparing our business to, I suppose, allow our employees to work effectively wherever they are, engage our members effectively wherever they are, and allow, I suppose, those partners and people like Caroline mentioned, the members of the board, how do we get them fully engaged in a modern practice, in a modern way of doing things? So I think bringing that back and looking at a plan from a people, process, and technology point of view is going to bring huge benefits to the organization, because now all the stakeholders are involved, and we're going to be able to say, well, actually, if we are to adopt this modern approach, if we are to, I suppose, deliver the tool set to our staff and our customers that are adapting to this pace, well, we want to do it in a very, very controlled fashion. We want to make sure that we're, you know, not only meeting or you know, adhering to the guidance that the central bank are giving us, but also adhering to best practice and putting in good governance, setting ourselves up for success in the future as well.
It's an interesting thought. I like the people, process, technology acronym as well. So it really is about a step back before we move forward. And I think it's just the biggest challenge is maybe making time for so many of these things. But I think you can be smart with your time if you get the right stakeholders in the room. And I think a plan can be developed in a relatively short amount of time. We're kind of at the 3/4 mark here. I just want to remind our attendees, please do get your questions in, because I do want to do a Q&A at the end. Not too often you get three speakers like my panel here today in the room, so please do use the time wisely. I guess I'm going to look to the future. I guess Finian has worked, he's spoken a little bit about the planning and what's required. I want to look at, I suppose, Finian, if you give us a few quick wins, certainly on the security side, within an Office 365 environment, we'll have a lot of Office 365 users on this. What are quick wins we can look at straight off the bat?
Yeah, I think there's some basics out there, and Adele would know this very, very well in terms of things like multi-factor authentication, our standards, things like securing your devices. And, you know, something that I've seen quite a lot these days is that our approach to devices is very, very different. You know, if we have a smartphone in front of us here right now, we go, yeah, well, it's just a phone. The reality of this smartphone is it costs the same amount as a laptop. It can do pretty much the same amount as a laptop. And our end users are using it pretty much in many ways that they use a laptop to do their work and to do their personal lives. So we need to make sure that we're securing our devices as much as we're securing many, many other things. I suppose in looking to the future is that the goalposts are continuously moving. This isn't something that we can be static about. It's not something that we can rest on our laurels, but it is something that we have to engage all the stakeholders. We have to engage our team. We have to educate our team. And there was one thing you alluded to earlier on. It's a phrase I use very regularly, the assumption of knowledge. We assume that our staff know how to use the tools that we've given them. We assume that they know how to use it in a secure fashion. But the reality is, have we actually showed them? Have we actually trained them properly? You know, even if we're giving them the best of breed tools, are we actually encouraging them and demonstrating to them, right, here's how you use it? But not only that, I'm going to come back to you in a month's time or 2 months' time or on a continuous basis and educate you on the risks. So I think it's that forward-looking approach, and that, you know, Caroline mentioned earlier on, you know, in terms of partnership and in terms of working together, everyone needs to be proactive. It can't be reactive because we're behind the curve already. So the more proactive we can be, and the more looking ahead, kind of over the horizon we can be, the better it's going to be for all involved.
Excellent. Caroline, thoughts on the future? What will be included maybe in your IT plan coming into 2021? And I guess what else would you like to see from a technology standpoint that might help your members and your staff?
Well, I suppose one of the things that I suppose I would reiterate from the other two speakers is your security is only as good as your weakest link. So if you're to introduce something that it's so important that you have a very strong team together, you put your plan in place, and that, as Adele said, we address it every quarter. We identify the new risks as they happen. We put them on the dashboard. We put a time frame around when we can mitigate against that risk. And I think that is so important going forward, because I suppose planning to go forward, all of us are going to have the IT strategy, instead of being a small part of our plans going forward, or of our strategic plan, it's going to be a major part. It really is going to be a major part. We're going to be looking at how our members can onboard online, how they can do a loan application online, how the loan can be issued online, and how they can do anything that they need to do with us online. So the IT platform is obviously what's going to support all of that, and that needs the security, that needs the I suppose the group think. It needs that team, that strong team in place to support that going forward, because it has to be a part of going forward. As we move forward, I think the online platform is going to be the way to go. I really do. I think people are going to, that's what they're going to want to do. You're always going to have an element that's going to want face to face, of course you are, but there's going to be more of an element that are going to want to do their business online.
It's interesting. We're really seeing maybe not the birth, but maybe the acceleration of the digital credit union. So I think that's I think it's very, very exciting for everyone out there. Adele, I suppose final thoughts, like what advice would you give to IT managers and CEOs who are sitting down there to talk about data protection and IT security? What are the key tips as we conclude the webinar?
Well, I think, Peter, that having a strong IT support team and especially a very, very good relationship with your IT provider is key to this. And trust is absolutely enormous in this, so that if your IT provider we see it sometimes where we're doing audits and we come back with reports and we come along with a list of recommendations, and it turns out that the IT provider has been saying for ages, you should do this, but sometimes it's maybe seen as a bit of an upsell, or do we really need this, or they're just leveraging another few quid out of us every month. So that trust is a huge issue, and I suppose, and not to see IT security as a no. When Tony Holland came back the other day, it was all like, oh, here comes the principal is back again, and IT security is a little bit like that, where oh God, they're coming again now to tell us what we can't do. And so I suppose IT security, when it's done right, actually benefits the organization, because I can guarantee you that nothing is more inconvenient than a data breach, and having to manage a data breach and deal with an IT security incident is a nightmare, and everything stops. And so, you know, that is an issue. So I think that, you know, even it's just to give an example of how IT security can assist. We do monitor, we monitor Caroline's email servers, and to see what mails are going out, or who might be spoofing to pretend that they're sending emails as Limerick Credit Union. So that's outside of the infrastructure that the Action Point monitor and are responsible for. So because, you know, there's stuff that happens that you can't control. So we noticed that the mails had gone out over a server, and it turned out that there was a survey that Caroline had sent out, and there was just a small misconfiguration. It was nobody's fault. It was just one of these things. But that would have meant that potentially that was blocked as spam. Now, I think in that instance, it wasn't, Caroline, everything was okay, but those types of issues can lead. We flagged it, so the next time we'll have the settings set right, that will be guaranteed that these mails, so Limerick Credit Union had invested in time and marketing and all of this service to send this out, and then if a bulk of those had ended up in everybody's spam folder, that would have been a waste of time. So in the security sense there, that was flagged and picked up, saying, look, there's a server sending mail out, there's something not quite right here. So, you know, security can benefit as well as being the big no as well. So yeah,
and it's been proactive and engaging with the partners as well. And as you said, it's always on, and I suppose your IT security always has to be on, because the threats are always on. So I think that's a pertinent message to finish with, Edel. So thank you guys very much for your contributions today. I have a couple of questions in here. First question here from Carol. It might be for all of you, but maybe towards Caroline. How do you encourage members to become as digitally focused as we are? Age profile of members is usually very high in CUs, not willing or capable to make this change.
I think COVID-19 changed that. To be honest with you, that we were very surprised at the number of members, older members, because we would have, you know, our credit union is nearly 50 years old, so we'd have a lot of older, vulnerable members. But they were very, very frightened of the disease. So what we did was we invested resources in being there to handhold, literally handhold them through it. So talk them through, you know, going online, and talk them through making that change. And every time they had an issue, we had 3 staff put aside that they could ring in, and one of the staff would talk them through, and they might talk them through the same thing 3 or 4 or 5 times until they got used to looking up to see what their statement was, and until they got used to transferring money in or transferring money out. But it took hand holding. It certainly took hand holding, and we were willing to give that the time, because we had very few people coming into the counter at the time, so I had the resources to do that.
Yeah, it's almost I wouldn't say you're forcing it on people, but the activity is happening around them. So I guess an adoption program. Finian, what would you have to say to Carol's question there?
Yeah, I suppose I'm thinking about that. It really it makes me think about how member-centric credit unions need to be, and you need to be at both ends of the spectrum, in terms of, you know, one end with our digital natives who have fundamental expectation that I can do everything online, and I never want to go into the office. I never want to actually go into the physical building. I want to do it all online. To the other spectrum who might be, you know, digitally terrified or just not used to work. Maybe that's generational or for various other means. I think Caroline hit the nail on the head in terms of having clinics, engaging with those members and bringing them in and say, actually, there is nothing to fear here. We're going to step you through it. And you know what, we're happy to step you through it a number of times so that you become more comfortable. You know, what I've seen certainly with COVID over the last number of months is that I suppose the generational thing, or the generational fear of technology, to a certain degree has been reduced. You know, grandkids contacting their grandparents, and people, you know, communicating more effectively together, be it through WhatsApp or various other tools, you know, has become the norm. So I think the level of education has gone up, or the level of awareness has gone up. So now that there is a comfort factor increase, it's not a silver bullet by any means, But I think for a credit union to focus in on both ends of those spectrum, yes, we understand some of our members are going to need extra hand-holding, and you know what, we're not going to hide behind a counter to do that. We're going to be very open and interactive about that. Back to the other end of the spectrum where Caroline mentioned, yes, we need to be fully in for online. Everything needs to be available. And that has many, many other benefits to the credit union as well.
A question there from Dave, maybe for Caroline as well. Caroline, you're getting all the questions here. But have you found that board meetings have become a bit more efficient and effective since we started using Teams?
Yes, we have. We've actually commented on that. Our chair has mentioned that a number of times, that the meetings have become more efficient. All of our board receive all their reports by the 10th of the month, and they would receive those in decision time, and then we would have the meeting the last Thursday of the month. And what we're finding is that the board meetings have been reduced by about an hour. So
Wow.
it has got far more efficient. Yeah,
that's significant.
far more
Oh
efficient.
my God,
Yeah.
Finian, from the Action Point perspective, I think we've seen a little bit of that, haven't we?
Yeah, I think it was just going to comment on it. I've seen it not only from the Action point of view, but I've heard anecdotally of golf committee meetings and many, many other meetings where they have become more efficient. And for me, there's two sides to that. It's actually great because there isn't that opportunity, you know, in a digital world like this for people to go on and on and on, and often down rabbit holes, which sucks time. But I think that the negative side of that is that in this virtual world, as positive as it is, we're not getting that human interaction, we're not getting that human touch. So I think everyone needs to bear in mind that while digital is going to have a huge role into the future, we can't get away from that human touch, and we still need that human interaction. Those, you know, the elements of small talk, the elements of those bumping into people and meeting in the corridor kind of conversations that often go either side of be it board meetings or other meetings, are still vitally important. So, you know, we look forward to a world where both can work hand in hand.
Yeah, actually interesting. I have a question in here from Margaret, and she's asking that same thing. You know, what are there tools, are there features that are in our existing tool stack within Teams? Is there anything there that will promote more virtual networking and more of that kind of virtual connection?
Yeah, I think there's lots of ways to do it. I suppose interestingly in Action Point, some of the things that we do are virtual coffees and virtual 11s and things like that. Even, you know, we have our monthly virtual quiz trying to bring the team together and I suppose avoid shop talk to a certain degree. So that comes into play in a big aspect. But I think it's, you know, it comes back to the personal touch. It comes back to people, you know, no more than you'd walk by someone's desk and have a quick chat to them about, you know, how are the kids and what's going on. That people need to be aware that, you know what, you can do that in a virtual world as well. You know, drop into people, hey, what's going on? How are you getting on? How's life, kind of thing? How are you coping with the change that's happening? So, you know, it is a challenge, and it's a mindset shift that some people need to adopt, and many of us need to adopt. But I think, you know, it's something that we're encouraging a lot of people to say, well, actually, it's not just about the fixed 10 o'clock meeting that we have about, you know, a particular subject. We need to try and communicate effectively with our workers and with our colleagues, and making sure we're bringing in elements of the real office back into play, you know.
Interesting. I've one final message from Shane, or one final question from Shane here. Guys, if you anything else you want to ask, please do let us know. It's actually for Adele. I guess one of the things that came out early on around kind of May or June was the security concerns with Zoom. Now, maybe you can comment on it, but what would be your advice there for people that are using Zoom currently?
Well, I think the main issue with Zoom is to make sure that, and this goes for any software application that you have, is to make sure that you've patched and that you're using the most up-to-date version of the application. And the other thing is always make sure that you have a password on your meeting. Yeah, and you know you know, I've heard stories locally. I've heard stories of things that happened in Limerick with people on chat getting Zoom bombed and videos and nasty videos being shared. And those are the types of things where people say, well, what does it matter? Why do they do that? You know, it doesn't matter. But the reason the attackers do this is they're trying to sell those videos online. They post in their link and everybody clicks it on the chat or whatever it is. And now all of a sudden their views have gone up by X number of people, and so they can say, when they go to sell these videos, then they're like, oh yeah, we've got X number of views and we've had, you know, whatever it is. So there's always a reason why something is being posted, or if there's an attack, there's always a reason behind it. And 99% of the time, the reason is financial. And actually, one thing that I wanted to say, Peter, I suppose that in relation to credit unions, is that I believe that it's very, very important for credit unions to have their security, for their security house to be in order, and their IT infrastructure to be tight, because the people and the members have a very trusting relationship with the credit union, and they trust the credit unions a lot more than they do the banks. And you know, they don't see them as these huge commercial machines as much as they see the banks. And I think that there's a lot of responsibility then is landed on the plate of the credit union to make sure that they're respecting the member data, and that they're treating it properly, and that they're doing everything they can to minimize the risk. Because you know, you will have a data breach, or you will have a security incident at some stage. That's inevitable. Everybody is going to have a security incident. Whether you know you have it or not is the thing, and then that you've planned how to respond to that when it happens. But I think that the credit unions, definitely their member profile and what's expected of them from being open and being transparent and not trying to hide things, I think is it means that security needs to be front and center. Really, I hate that phrase, but it needs to be up there at every level of every discussion. Yeah.
Excellent. Guys, I think that kind of rounds off the final segment of the talk. I'm just going to share a quick slide here, which is going to be on the wrong side. That's okay. So look, I just want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. It's been brilliant hearing from Caroline, Finian, and Edel on the various, I suppose, technology challenges facing credit unions now and into the future, and I hope you found it valuable from our perspective. There's a little bit of a feedback survey at the very end, and I would please encourage you to take it, because look, we're trying to make the content as relevant and as topical as possible, and we need that feedback, I suppose, to develop the best content for you. I would have we launched our Action Point Credit Union 2020 report just a few weeks ago, so I'll share a link to that in the accompanying email at the end of the webinar as well. But I just want to go through one or two quick items here that might be of interest. So I guess we've talked about a lot of topics here today. We talked about secure remote working. We've talked about the hybrid workplace. So we're going to run a couple of initiatives, I think, to really maybe help credit unions along their journey. So one thing Finian is our Action Point are offering is a free Microsoft Teams security assessment. And it's so funny that, you know, we have Teams, we have Office 365 set up. We think we're all good from a security point of view, but there's a couple of there's a couple of security features within Teams that aren't always maybe configured correctly or switched on correctly. So this free Microsoft Teams security assessment will help to highlight any of those issues, and we'll be able to remediate them as well once we have you engaged. That's completely free to everyone listening today, whether you're an Action Point customer or not. The other area we're very excited about is the hybrid working half-day workshop. So we've developed a program that looks at what a hybrid work environment looks like, from everything from your end user experience to your security, to your multi-location, and everything in between. We also look at, you know, productivity tools and trips. Is there automation that can be enabled? And I guess the goal of this, and we're running this across sectors, not just for credit unions, is really to get people ready for the hybrid working environment and to optimize that environment so that your business can succeed ultimately. So we've worked very close with our partners, Microsoft, and internally as well on that. So really, really excited about that one. On the survey, you can actually tick if you want to hear more about those workshops. So I'd encourage you to do it if it's something of interest. And other than that, that's my little sales pitch out of the way. So look, I'd like to thank my speakers once again, Edel, Caroline, and Finian. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Shout out to Vincent Healy as well, our credit union lead, who's listening in the background as well. And Vincent's on hand to handle any of your queries should you have any. So yeah, without further ado, thanks a million, guys, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.